Welcome back to Oliver Scholar's CEO Salon series with your host, Dr. Danielle Cox. On this episode, join us as we talk with God-Is Rivera, Chief Content Officer at Essence Ventures, about the importance of nurturing inclusive spaces for our youth in education and the world. It's going to be a good one. Grab your coffee and let's talk.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for tuning in once again for another Oliver Scholars Coffee Talk. For those of you who have been with us previously, you know that we launch these conversations to get information, to share information, and also to raise awareness about issues that are affecting the young Black and Brown people that we serve at Oliver, but our communities more broadly. So with that, I'm going to ask God-Is Rivera to join the conversation.
Hello. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for taking the time to do this. So I'm not going to waste your time. I'm going to try to jump right in.
Let's do it.
Yesterday, we hosted a college access and success symposium, and some of that conversation focused in on the Supreme Court's decision to eliminate race as a consideration in higher education. As you can imagine, given your role at Essence Ventures, the subtext of that question really focused on whether or not we would start to see a disappearance of DEI efforts in corporate spaces.
Right.
So I'm sure this is top of mind for you and some of your colleagues. And we're seeing a retrenchment following all of the enthusiasm after the murder of George Floyd. And we're just trying to figure out what that means for the young people who are going to be going into the workplace. So what is your take on the future of DEI in corporate spaces?
Yeah, I think from where I sit now, in my role as a chief content officer at a company that serves priority Black voices, Black women, but also the new general market through many of the companies. I think about being able to make sure that we're telling the stories of people who are being affected by what is happening right now. And then also as a leader, right, I've been at Fortune 50 companies and major platforms, who has been a part of building and creating and implementing many of these programs. So I think about what happens if we start to take our foot off the gas. So I think one of the things that's important to me is I'm really proud that the work that I've been pushing for and so many other folks have been pushing for in the space of diversity, equity, inclusion, what has been for years, right? I remember having my sort of breakthrough moment. I was in an advertising agency in 2016, and I sort of kicked the door in by saying the job that I'm doing as an associate director of social, as a strategist on these accounts, I cannot do this job when nobody on the team reflects nor understands other different types of cultures. Like, we cannot actually do the work. And so I think for me, even now, as I've continued to see this ebb and flow, which is really just connected to power structures and so many other pieces. And I think what we're seeing is sort of a proxy in this sort of rescinding of DEI or the efforts. I like to tell young mentees and young students is that there is a job to be done. There is a demographic shift that is happening both in the United States and globally. If you have people at the helms of companies that cannot connect with their consumers, the job cannot be done. That's just it. People can go home and feel how they want to feel about it, but we can't actually do good work that continues to power the private sector and beyond if we're not able to understand and connect with diverse groups. So I think right now what we're seeing is sort of a proxy distraction for other issues, with sort of a scare tactic to say, we are not going to focus on DEI anymore. And I think to see it at the highest court in the land, it's really just demoralizing for so many people. And we've been definitely following the story. But I think what I would tell people who feel like I'm one person, right, in a school. I'm one person in a company. How the heck am I going to go against a Supreme Court decision or a major executive decision to no longer focus here? You can always focus on what needs to be done. And when you make products work, when you make services better, when you tell stories and create campaigns that work for the most marginalized people, it always works best for everybody. And so I think focusing on that as an anchor in what's happening right now is important. Uh-oh, I think we might have had some.
Sorry about those we had a few technical difficulties, but we're back on the scene. We were just talking about the future of DEI in corporate America,
Yes.
given what we're seeing in higher education. And, I understand that the next lawsuit is going to focus on the independent school pipeline. And so I think it's like a 1, 2, 3 punch, right? Cut off access at every point to ensure that the face of leadership in our country continues to reflect what it always has historically.
Right.
So,
And I do think, to your point, before I know we get into the next question, is just, I think it also, just as 2020 did, just as many of the unfortunate events and tragic deaths of the years before, I think we have an opportunity to relook at what does society mean? Because we should be in a society that is equitably funded, that people can go to a public school, an independent school, and achieve a level of success or beyond, right? We have created this very unequal society that, even as you mentioned, and my daughter's in independent school, she loves it. It's been amazing. I went to one as well. But that shouldn't be some of the only options either. Well, so that now there can be, I can cut this off and now, really change the outcomes of people's experiences. And so I think it's an opportunity for us to sort of look at the type of society we're in and the deep, deep, deep changes that we need to make. And I really hope that the youth, Gen Z, we counting on y'all. I know you're fired up about a lot of stuff, so I'm telling you to be fired up about this. I love the energy that Gen Z is even bringing to corporate America. The kind of, they sometimes get railed on by some of the other generations, but that sort of, why do I need to accept this? Why do I need to be in an office 5 days a week? Why do I only get to take vacation 2 weeks, a year? Those were the things that were just not challenged. And so I hope that they continue that spirit in saying, well, why is it that we need this to succeed, or only some of us get this? And now you're taking us out of even that. We have to find a solution for all. And I'm hoping that this will, what's happening now is probably going to get worse before it gets better, but I'm hoping that it sparks real solutions across the board.
Thank you for that. So one of the things that has come to the fore is a newfound love and affection for historically Black colleges and universities. And maybe newfound is too strong a word, but I think that more and more of our young people, particularly those who've had to navigate
Right.
independent school spaces where they were not in the majority, are like, you know what? I want to learn without having to explain myself or justify my existence.
Yes.
And I think one of the questions that is often posed as a way to kind of push back, we know that more doctors, more lawyers, more folks in corporate actually have come from HBCUs. But I think we're still kind of very in tune to this narrative that corporate is only going to heavily recruit from Ivies and other majority white institutions. How do you think, given your history with HBCUs, that we can capitalize on this moment to strengthen those institutions and ensure that students who attend those institutions have access to leadership tracks?
Yes. I'm a huge proponent of HBCUs, attended Clark Atlanta University. I applied to both Clark and Spelman. I knew I was going to be at an AUC somehow. I got into both, went to Clark for Mass Comm. And I think for me, you're right. I think you explained it right, because I was just talking about sort of the ebb and flow of HBCU energy. I remember in the early aughts, My grandfather was, I'm coming out of independent school, and I had made my choice day one in ninth grade. Had a great experience, but I already knew where I wanted to be. I wanted to be at a different world. I wanted to be at Hillman. That was what I saw for myself. And I said, Mama and Daddy, I'll give you these 4 years. It was great. But I was one of the only ones. I was one of the first Black homecoming queens at my independent school that had been started decades before I got there, right? And so I think I am seeing a newfound energy, because there was sort of this sort of idea that, especially if you weren't talking about some of the major HBCUs like the Spelmans, like the Howards, and I want to make sure that there's love given to the experience at many HBCUs, from the smaller ones to the more specialized ones. There are so many great experiences that come with being in a learning environment that is nurtured and you're surrounded in your community. It is an experience that we really don't get in that way anymore. Even the way cities and towns and so forth are structured today, we don't have that communal sort of deeply entrenched experience anymore. And for me, it was transformative. But I think, going back to my earlier point of thinking about being in the advertising agencies and saying, I am working on a major client, a major CPG brand, a major travel destination. You are not trying to connect with one type of person. You are trying to connect with people from all different cultures. And so making sure that, you have people in these spaces who are creating campaigns, who are analyzing data and insights that can understand it. For point in case, I remember when Kamala Harris was running for office, and they kept saying, there's that sound that people make when she comes around. Kamala is an AKA, is ski wee, and media didn't even understand that that's a staple of HBCU and, Greek culture. And so I feel that it's something where I remember being so proud to say, I am offering something in this room, whatever room I was in any corporate environment, that none of y'all have. I'm a Black American woman. I've went to an HBCU. I know things about culture and from popular culture that you have no idea what it is. I know school days. I know, dances and music and parts of our history and people who have been transformative to society. And I've learned them in ways that give me a different perspective. And so I would say to the students and families to consider HBCUs, because when you're able to learn in an environment that feels like community, you're able to absorb so much. And that doesn't mean that PWIs don't work. They do, absolutely. But it's just, I think, a special experience that if you do this, it does not mean that you will not be successful or being able to be recruited as some of the larger companies, because those larger companies are now seeing that they need the perspective and experience that HBCUs provide and the alumni that come out of them. The other thing I will say is that our alumni has been kicking butt. We are out here. Look at where some of the HBCU alumni has landed, and we are the ones making sure that we say, no, we need to make sure that person from Claflin is here, that person from SC State, that person from, Xavier, all of these places. And so I think what has changed in the last 20 to 25 years, a lot of us have kicked the door down in some of the industries that we're executives in now. And we are making sure that we honor those experiences, because we know how valuable they are in these boardrooms and on the teams that we lead every day.
So important. So for those of our young people or families who may not be aware, can you tell us, what is a chief content officer, and what was your pathway to this role of this iconic Essence brand? I had an internship at Essence Television when I was a senior in high school.
Ooh, Essence
I've always had a
TV.
special affection for Essence and the community of folks who've helped to sustain the brand.
Yeah. So as chief content officer now, I'll answer this part first. What my job is really ensuring that I create, implement, and guide the entire strategy across what is a digital media consortium of 4 different brands. So Essence, ECI, Essence Communications is the magazine that you so lovingly know, and that brand serving Black women deeply for over 50 years. And then there's also Afropunk, which is also a legacy brand, not as old as Essence, but definitely sort of came from the ground up, serving the alternative person who was saying, I'm not here to conform to society in many ways, serving that sort of punk ethos, and then with the intersection of race, class, and gender. And then also BeautyCon, thinking differently about the way beauty is presented to the world. And then also Essence Studios, which is really sort of a production house across all of Essence Ventures, where you may have seen Time of Essence is one of the most recent projects, which talked about Essence Magazine's 50 plus year history and founding. So, what that means to me is, how are we creating content across all different mediums, from editorial to video to branded content, which means we're partnering with brands to tell stories that connect with both consumers in a mutually beneficial way. And I think, what's important to me is that digital media is so much the future of where we are. So to be able to come in and do this for not only a brand that I grew up with Essence Magazine on the coffee table, my grandmother's house, my mother's, house, and now being able to make sure that I'm at the helm of what the next era of this brand looks like is just phenomenal. And the skill set that I'm bringing, you asked sort of what led me here. I mentioned being a mass comm major at Clark Atlanta. I thought I wanted to be a journalist. And one thing I will say to the students and parents alike is that the job you may have may not exist yet. And I think that that's something, especially for young people now, to think through. The job that I wanted, I could only see as far as what existed. I really ended up having jobs that didn't exist during the time that I was even in school. But what I always focused on was what my passion was. So my passion was always, I wanted to elevate the stories and the perspectives of people who have been the most marginalized and the most excluded. That's it. And I said, I want to be a journalist. Like, that's the way you would think, right? In the early aughts, this is how you would do this. You would write stories, you would tell their stories, kind of circled all the way back now. But the pathway that I ended up doing to get there was, I started in marketing and advertising. And that's the other piece. I want you all to know, don't be scared by what's happening in the world. There is always something that affects where you are. I got out of school with a major recession, right? It was a major recession, so much so that I couldn't find any work in what I thought I was going to do. And I had to take something else, which was marketing, which became my passion, because I realized through marketing strategy, you could actually still find a way to raise the perspectives and integrate people and communities, and making sure they had an imprint on culture through the way that brands told their story to the world, right? And so I think it was something that I didn't consider, even though marketing did exist during my time. It just wasn't the way that I thought the mission that I was on would come to life. And it ended up being that. As I continued on that journey and really started calling out the fact that we need to have a relationship with the communities that we're serving, whether it's content, marketing, or social media, I was able to create 2 new roles that never existed before, that now have continued on. One in the agency side of the world, advertising agency, and the other in the platform world, where I worked at Twitter for 4 years. And I was the first global director of culture and community, which was a role that simply focused on marginalized communities, Black, Latinx, LGBTQ plus intersectionally, the disability community intersectionally, and Native Indigenous communities in the US and Canada. And we hope to expand at the time. And so I say all that to say is that I wrote the job description for that role at my kitchen table, including the title, but I was still doing the same thing that 18-year-old God-Is wanted to do, which was make sure that we are valuing and amplifying the voices and the stories of people who are most marginalized. So I want to give some hope to folks who say this economy is crazy and there's always something, right? I had 9/11, you all have a pandemic, and you have a crazy market right now. There's always something. Anchor yourself in what your passion is, and be open to understanding that as industries evolve, staying close to that passion and finding ways to do that, it may come to you in ways that you wouldn't expect. So that was my journey. I hope that was not too long-winded, but
No, that was amazing. That was amazing. So can you talk a little bit about what you see as the future for Black and BIPOC media
yeah,
going forward?
I think when I think about media and Black media specifically, I go back to what has always fascinated me, and what I love about being a Black woman myself is the idea that we're always driving culture forward. We're always the ones who are at the forefront of change, equity, what's popular, what's hot. That is who we are, right? That is etched into our DNA and has been for centuries. And so I think when I think about Black media, I think about, especially now, we opened this interview talking about some of the headwinds that are coming at us based on a lot of, I think, identity insecurity from folks who have been in power for many, many years, who are afraid to see that shift even a little bit, even a little bit.
Right.
And so I think when I think about the future of Black media and I look at the way people, literally the stories, Black stories and Black voices and perspectives are under attack,
Yeah.
not even just in the United States, but on a global level. I think our responsibility as Black media is to continue to be a steward to make sure that our perspectives and our stories are not forgotten. They are also valued and they are recognized and considered across the board. So I think about, we talked about the DEI and some of those Supreme Court decisions. Imagine, it all feels so relevant to us now, but it'll be 100 years from now, one day. And what if we never heard from some of the Black women who opened something like the Fearless Fund, who were the ones who were funding Black women, startups, and are now being attacked through this Supreme Court decision? If we never heard from them, if we didn't know what they felt like going through this, why they created this, why it was important, how they fought back, what you would think about what happened 100 years from now would be very different. So I think about the posterity and the responsibility that we have to continue the storytelling and to make sure that our place as those culture creators and culture shapers remains. And I think that if we take our foot off the gas and we don't have a place in doing so and recognize that responsibility, that, it could shape history in ways that we would not be happy about.
So so Oliver's has 3 tenets: leadership, scholarship, service. And I feel like we've hit on the leadership, we've hit on the scholarship, given your amazing accomplishments. Can you talk to us about service, ways in which you may still be connected to communities in the Bronx, and how you just keep that grounding?
Yes. I'll never not give back to the communities that shaped me, to the people who I know I can make a difference in shaping. I am so fortunate that so many people poured into me and also gave me chances, a lot of chances. Mentors of mine who have just been instrumental. And I think about how I can do this on a consistent basis. Thinking about my hometown, I was so fortunate to be honored on the Bronx Walk of Fame last year in 2023. So my mama's super proud. Yes, we go to the Grand Concourse. I'm right on 140th. So for my excellence in marketing and achievements there. And, I wanted to make sure we continue that relationship. So I'm a proud advisory board member of the Bronx Tourism Council. Again, thinking through places that have been counted out. My birthplace, I'm from, 233rd Street and White Plains Road in New York City in the Bronx. And a lot of people feel like you're from that street, your value is different than people from other streets. And I think that always just stuck with me, that I need to make sure that I'm showing up in these places and I am continuously working to make sure that the definition of value includes people like me. And so I am really adamant about being in spaces and giving my time to doing that. I also have worked with ColorCom and their mentorship program. This is really important to me. Shout out to Lauren and that team, who is awesome and has recognized my work before. And again, I wanted to make sure that I'm giving back, even if they never recognized me. It was important for me to show up for young, especially Black women, young Black and Latinx girls. Those are the people who shaped me. I love the men too, but I just know there's so many different pieces, especially in corporate spaces and academic spaces, for young women of color that I know sometimes in your family, you may or may not have somebody who has experience with those things. And you need to say, well, what was it like when you were in a board meeting and this came up? What was it like when you had to fight for a salary increase? What is it? When's the time to get a lawyer to negotiate a contract? You know what I mean? And so these are sometimes experiences that our family has not had, or our circle. So I really do try and make myself available to continue to mentor. I had a really proud moment. I never brag on myself, but it's part of the question, so I'm going to make myself do it. I received I was inducted into the American Advertising Federation's Hall of Achievement last year in 2023. And
Oh,
I'm beyond proud of that moment. It blew my mind. I couldn't even believe. And my husband convinced me to throw a little shindig, like right after the award ceremony. And I said, all right, I'll just jump in here and go see folks. There was someone from every company I ever worked at
oh wow.
that came, and it wasn't people that I hadn't spoken to in years. It's still people who I say, hey, you have a minute, or they say that to me, and I give my advice. We talk through things. I've done countless recommendations for people, countless, helping people through really tough situations and in corporate environments, especially as Black and brown women. And so it just meant a lot to me. And I hope that as people think about their career, it's very important what you do. It's also just as important who you are. And that's something that's important to me. So I'm still that same girl. They say Jenny from the block is God-Is from the block. With a Southern Black family who grew up eating grits and fried green tomatoes, in the Bronx. And I think that, to me, that's who I fought for. That's why I do what I do. And so to stay connected to that is really important to me. And I try and do that with the organizations I'm a part of. The AAF also has a great HBCU program that they've started to widen that pipeline as well. I'm going to be doing some work, hopefully, with them very soon. They've reached out. So there's many different ways to stay connected. MAPE as well is another great program. Add Color, really great programs that have
college students are paying attention.
Yeah, come on, I'm giving y'all the keys.
Come
I'm giving y'all the keys. These are places that you can connect with now. And I will say, listen to me, students. What I wished I had more than anything, we were talking about this backstage before, is LinkedIn. LinkedIn is a savior. I was writing letters, or if you can believe it, on paper, trying to, send notes to people who I hope to have an internship, who I hope to understand. Not only can you see who's at the companies and the organizations that you want to be a part of, you can reach out to them directly. I know y'all have your fun on Snapchat and IG and all of this and TikTok. That's fine. LinkedIn is your friend. And I see ninth graders, I would start thinking about reaching out to folks. Who do you like? Who do you want to talk to? You never know who's going to write back and say, sure, I'll give you a 5-minute coffee over Zoom, And so think about networking early.
Can you share the best piece of advice you got?
Oh, man. Yeah. I'm trying to think of, coming into the workplace. I think the best piece of advice, you know what? I'm going to give this to folks. I think you get in this place where you feel like, especially when you're starting out, that you're looking up at these giants and they know everything and they know how to do all the things. And you just are trying to get there and you're so far away. Even really great, successful people are all day by day trying to figure out how to be good at what they're doing. Nobody has it all figured out.
Yep.
Nobody is perfect at any of this. There is always, no matter who you are, there's always going to be a challenge that you've never seen before. And you're going to have to go in a room with some people that you hopefully trust and respect a lot and say, okay, what can we do? And you're going to have to get to the right decision. So I think it's important to recognize, of course, people's worth ethic and their accomplishments, but understanding that everybody is just trying to figure it out moment to moment, and yes, you get better at doing that through experience. But I think sometimes we put people on such a pedestal and feel that when we first start out, don't have anything to offer. And that's not true. It's nothing wrong with it. May be something that as you get higher in your field, you might miss something that somebody who's just starting could call out. So I would encourage you to say, even if it's school, hey, this thing doesn't seem to be working, or hey, this thing could be better. And I always say, find the gap, be the solution. If you're going to point something out, think about a plan even if it's not you, and say, hey, this doesn't look right, or this could be improved. Here's how I would do it, or here's a place you can start, and maybe I can help you do that. And I literally, as I talked about earlier, was able to create two brand new roles because I was doing that. So I think that's the advice I would give for young people who are just starting out, is that don't discount the experience and perspective that you have at any time. You can always learn and be gracious, but it's always useful and valuable.
Well, God-Is, I want to thank you so much for taking this time to have what I think was a short but highly impactful conversation. I hope this is not the last time we'll see you at the Oliver Scholars family. Thank you so much for your support and your wisdom. And I will be looking for you on LinkedIn. I think I already sent you an invite.
I'll be there. I hope to see some students there too.
Yes, for sure.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it. This was great.